I've decided to call this chord the Blackadder chord.
The Blackadder chord.
Well, the Blackadder chord.
ブラックアダーコード
The Blackadder chord. What is that? Well, let me play you a song real quick. So yes, that G flat augmented over C chord is the Blackadder chord. The Blackadder chord is made up of an augmented chord and a bass note, a tritone below it. But of course, like everything in music theory, it can't be that easy. There's a lot more to it. Let me explain some of the lore to you. 2 5-1s. You know them, you love them, they're everywhere but they get boring. This leads many composers to try to come up with alternatives or alterations on it. There are many different takes on it. Some change around the voicings, some add upper chord extensions, but for me the most interesting is substitution or even inserting chords. In jazz, a common alteration of the 2-5-1 is in tritone substitution, where the 5 is replaced with the dominant chord a tritone away. Some others add a dominant chord built off the 6th scale degree to have dominant tonic resolution to the 2 chord, further extending the progression. A popular alteration from Japan is the Blackadder chord. It uses chromatic voice leading to extend the 5 chord. So let's take a 2-5-1 but with this specific voicing. We can extend the 5 chord with some chromaticism to lead into the 1 chord. We can take the D on top and go D, D sharp to E, and then with the bass note we can go D to D flat to C. And then filling in the rest of the triad with common tones, we get a G augmented over D flat chord. Believe it or not, we just created the Blackadder chord. However, there's another way of creating the Blackadder chord, called the tritone flip. A tritone flip is when you take the root note of a chord, double it, and flip it a tritone away. If done on an augmented triad, you get the Blackadder chord. Here is an example of that. In fact, the composer of the song, Hidekazu Tanaka, says in a tweet that he changed the bass note of the augmented 3 chord to the flat 7, which is a tritone away, which in turn created the Blackadder chord. Because the augmented chord's property of being able to be labeled in 3 different ways, it can also be constructed as an augmented chord with a bass note of minor 7th or major 2nd below. The Blackadder chord can also go under a different name of the Japanese augmented 6th chord, or JA+6 for short. There are many types of augmented 6 chords, which are all just different ways of voicing and resolving a tritone substitution. The Japanese augmented 6 chord is voiced with an augmented triad and a bass note a minor 7th below. This also uses the motion of descending bass and ascending chords, taken from this Twitter post. Because of the Blackadder's chord's unique structure, it can be used in a multitude of different ways. First, I'll discuss the music theory purist side and how it should conventionally be used, and then I'll move on to the more common usages. The first way it can be used is extending a dominant chord. Because the relativity of Blackadder chords notes the diatonic dominant and target chord, it can be used as an extension of the dominant chord. The Blackadder chord can also be used to replace the dominant chord. This gets a little bit more into the technical side because now we have to label the chord a little bit differently. While thinking of it as an augmented chord with the root note is valid and correct in many circumstances, it can also be labeled as a dominant chord with upper extensions, specifically dominant 9, flat 5, no 3rd. In this case, the Blackadder chord is a G9 flat 5 no 3rd, acting as an altered 5 chord. It's made up of the notes G, F, A, and C sharp or D flat. The Blackadder chord can also be used as a tritone substitution. The same exact melody and chords are used, except the Blackadder chord is transposed down a tritone. You also may notice that the voicing is the exact same as the first example, G augmented over D flat, just under a different name. This is also the most common way to use the chord in relation to the progression, as an augmented 5 over flat 2 to 1. You'll see it rephrased as a sharp 4 Blackadder resolving to a 4. You can also use it as a half diminished chord. For example, it can be used as the diminished 2 in a minor 2-5-1. Because there's no 3rd in the chord, the quality is ambiguous and relies solely on context. Based on the extensions, it can be written as a half diminished 9 no 3rd or minor 9 flat 5 no 3rd. Now straying away from the more standard classical music theory and into the more common uses, it can be used to resolve down a half step. Many songs use a Blackadder chord this way. This example defines a Blackadder chord based on the bass note and resolves the chord down a half step. This use of the augmented 1 over sharp 4 or sharp 4 Blackadder is the most common way you'll see the Blackadder chord used. Instead of resolving the bass note down a half step, you can also resolve the triad down a half step. Naming the chord based on the bass note, this chord can also be written as a sharp 4 Blackadder chord. You can also really just use the Blackadder chord however you want. Because of its striking dissonance, it can be used to make interesting sound progression, bar, or whatever. So here's a short composition that I wrote using the Blackadder chord. And here's the same thing, but with all the dominant chords replaced as Blackadder chords, and the melody slightly altered to match. What I find interesting about this is that the chords and bass note now move chromatically downwards until the tonic is reached. Now the most common sharp 4 Blackadder is here in my own composition. Take a listen. So I wrote the song using both the anime canon and the Royal Road progression, two very popular chord progressions in Japan. But the Blackadder chord appears many times in the song as well. The first and second time it's used as a transition to the 4 chord to start the Royal Road progression. The E flat augmented chord resolves up to the A flat triad, and the A bass note resolves down to the A flat as well. The final 3 times it's used is as a tritone substitution for a strong resolution to the 1 chord. It's voiced as an E9 flat 5 no third, resolving to E flat major, although the melody emphasizes the B flat augmented rather than the dominant chord sound. So, the Blackadder chord is such an interesting chord. It originated in Japan, but it was named by Ongaku Concept in 2017. Its striking dissonance and clear and strong resolution make it a popular choice for a tension chord. It appears all over Japanese music and is a hip technique that, in my opinion, should be used more often in writing.